have a bunch of different ways to access that. But yeah, send it to your coaching staff, send it to your ADs, whoever, send it to anybody you want. It's definitely a great resource for us to use now that we have it. So, and we'll do the same with this week and the following weeks to come. So today's topic is goals versus purpose. So talking about how to realign kind of the way we see goals and the way we see purpose. So to start, we're going to give a couple definitions. So goal setting, or goals itself, refer to attaining a specific level of efficiency on a task, usually in a specified time limit. So task and time limit are kind of those two key words of how we identify goals. And then goals can either help or hinder performance. I'm sure we've all seen athletes who crunch under the pressure of a goal or bloom in the pressure of a goal and really embrace that. So the 3D coaching framework, Jeff Duke, who is the founder of the 3D framework, kind of identifies three types of goals that we're going to define and unpack a little bit here. So the first one is outcome goals. So outcome goals are the desired result of a competition. So these are very simple, like win the game, make the playoffs, win the SAC state championship this year, those type of goals. And Jeff would say that there's no coaching involved here. We may be able to give the kids the skills to maybe win a tournament or win the game, but once the whistle blows, once the gun fires, it's off of us. We don't have any control or real hand in winning the tournament, even though we may be the coach. The second kind is performance goals. So these are an athlete's actual performance in relation to their own standard of excellence. So an example of this would be 50% at the free throw line, or score 1 goal a game, or a touchdown every quarter, something like that. And again, Jeff Duke would say there's still no coaching involved here. These goals may just tell you what you need to work on at practice. So if an athlete says, I want to be 50% at the free throw line by the end of the season, he may take it upon himself, or even a coach may encourage him to maybe take 53 free throw shots at the end of every practice, right? So it's just something that kind of is up to the athlete's performance. And then before we get to the last one, the last type of goal, sorry, I can't talk today, it's Monday, we're going to ask a question. So when it comes to the performance of our team, what are some of our biggest sources of anxiety we experience as coaches? One for me, I'll just share really quick here. I really have a problem with just the control of the athlete's performance. Once the whistle blows, I have no control of whether we win or lose, or no control of whether we beat the rivals, or whatever it may look like. And, just coming out of competition myself, I'll find myself like kicking my leg out on the sideline, like reaching for the ball or yelling, shoot, 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 trying to do everything I can to have control over it instead of just letting the athlete play, trusting in my coaching ability, trusting in our coaching staff, and just letting the girls play. So that's probably my biggest source of anxiety. The control aspect is tough.
I would say I struggle with motivating. I find it really hard, this day and age, some kids just aren't motivated, and at the college level, especially where my experience is, it's very frustrating when a young athlete's not motivated. And so that's where a lot of my probably control or yelling on the sideline or energy comes from, is to, do your best, try your hardest. We won't have a shot unless you give it all. So I would say that's probably what I would say.
Yeah, so I'm going to go at it from the other extreme, because I'm still coaching at the middle school level. So at least at the collegiate level, yes, motivation is tough, but they're kind of all at least somewhat on the same level. In middle school, we got the travel players who've been playing for 10 years, and then people that really have barely know how to touch the ball. So it's getting those skilled players to, instead of ignoring and shunning those that aren't quite as skilled, to step it up and be the teacher and the encourager of those that are newer to the game, rather than, I'm not going to pass to her, she's not going to be able to do anything with that ball. So it's that different level play, and then really, along with you were saying, motivate the higher level players to be a teacher and an encourager rather than bring the whole team down to a negative level.
For me, I think one of the hardest parts is consistency. So maybe there's, in the game of volleyball, maybe from set to set, we have a set where we play extremely well. And then all of a sudden, maybe we kind of fall off, the wheels start falling off in set two. And so sometimes I think for me, one of the hardest parts in terms of performance with my team would just be trying to instill that consistency of, hey, you can play this well. We have this ability to play at this level. How can we make sure we consistently perform at that level instead of letting things drop off?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you guys for sharing. But Kelsey's is great to kind of segue into our last one here. So when we measure performance, we often get disappointed, right? Because we don't either have the control or the athlete doesn't have the motivation or the consistency there. But yeah, so we use performance goals to measure what we need to work on, right? So when we have a consistency issue, we need to tell our athletes, hey, you have this performance, you have this capability to perform. We know we can reach this level. So we need to get out there and do it every single set, every single minute, every single, whatever it is, quarter inning for you. But yeah, so performance and outcome goals just happen, right? They're not dependent on us as coaches, but process goals are coached. So that leads us to the last type of goal that Jeff Duke, the 3D Institute, identifies, process goals. So these are concerned with how our athletes perform particular skills or execute strategies in the moment. So these are coached. An example, so going back to the 50% at the free throw line, maybe this is keeping in your elbow every time you shoot, or locking your ankle every shot you take, those type of things about the performance of the athlete. So these happen in real time. They are executing strategies in the moment. This is kind of like the aha moment for the athlete, where you just see it and it just clicks, right? Like for Deb, where you have the athlete who does travel and has played soccer since she was alive, and then you have the athlete who maybe just is interested in soccer and she's just getting out there. This is the aha moment for you, where that athlete who's been doing it her whole life just willingly passes and encourages that athlete, and you just see it happen on the field. Or the consistency, where you just see it happen. Or maybe your athletes are starting to motivate one another, right? You're seeing that on the team, in the game, at practice. So that leads us to the first point of the day, which is be a coach of process. Be a coach of process. And that's definitely hard to do consistently, but it's about teaching them the skills that will prove them true in a game. So we're going to watch a quick video of Jeff Duke, who's the founder of the Institute, kind of explaining a little bit about how a process goal just worked out in a real game situation in a tournament. So I'm going to share my screen here.
I was at a basketball game a few years ago. One of the teachers, he was a social studies teacher, and he was a great social studies teacher and great basketball coach. He was in a game that they're always very competitive, great three-dimensional coach. Kids just play unbelievably. And by the way, remember, performance and outcomes are how we're measured. So as you have a strategy to engage in all three dimensions, that is what flows out, higher performance. So let's don't lose that. I don't want to lose the win in this process. But they were in a key game. They had to win the game to go to the state Final Four, high school Final Four. So I was at the game supporting him. He asked me to come to the game. A great game. Gym was packed. Came down to, they were down one, had the ball. Guard drove the lane, went up to shoot, got hit on the arm, ball did not go in, clock ran out. So he gets to go to the line to shoot two. He makes one, they tie the game. They're in overtime. Makes both, they win. Misses both, game over. So I'm standing there, and if you've ever been to that kind of basketball game, when the clock runs out, the officials will put the players on the bench. There's no need to be on the court. Game over, but he gets a chance to shoot 2 free throws. He's at the line by himself. Crowd going nuts. I mean, just loud. About 1,500. Little Jim only said about 1,200. About 1,500 people there, and they're just screaming and yelling. The coach, his coach, my friend, you can hear him saying something. He's yelling to the kid, but you can't hear it. He was out of timeouts, so he couldn't call timeout, couldn't bring the athlete back over. So he goes to the line. He's standing there. Referee, of course, bounces the ball to him. He goes to the line. Coach is yelling something. He doesn't hear. He can't because it's just too loud. Gets his dribbles, gets set, shoots the ball, goes off the back left side of the rim, bounces out. He's now down to 1. You win 1. He makes 1. We're in OT. Coach is still yelling something to him. He couldn't hear. Ball comes back. He's standing there. Dribbles, gets set, shoots the ball, hits the back of the rim, goes out. Game over. They lose. You can tell the young man was very disheartened. So I stayed around after. I wanted to talk to the coach for a few minutes, and the gym kind of cleared out. There was just a few people around, some administrators, and kind of getting things done. But everybody had gone. He had gone, and he talked to the team, and I'm just waiting outside the locker room because I want to talk to them and just share, because they did. They played with great attitude and great effort. And then he comes out of the locker room, the coach, with the athlete. Got a basketball in hand. And he takes him over to the free throw line. And I'm standing there listening. You can tell the kid's all discouraged. And the coach says, look, I want you to shoot these free throws. And the kid said, no, coach, come on, coach. You know, he's discouraged from not making the shots. And the coach said, no. He said, listen to me. You know what I was trying to share with you. And by the way, it was my fault that we ran out of timeouts. I should have saved one. I didn't. And you couldn't hear me. Hey, take the basketball. What do we always teach when we're shooting free throws? And the kid immediately went to what the process was, which the coach teaches a principle in basketball called BEEF, and a lot of you know that, B-E-E-F, typical free throw shooting. Balance, eyes on rim, elbow in, follow through. And as soon as he said BEEF, here's what the athlete, he looked at the coach, he goes, my elbow was out, wasn't it? Coach goes, yeah. I was trying to yell, beef, beef. You couldn't hear me because everybody was yelling. He said, shoot it. He said, oh, no, do. Balance. Eyes on rim. Elbows in, follow through. Shoot. Do it again. Balance. Elbows in, eyes on rim. Shoot. Do it again. Balance. Eyes on rim, elbows in. He did it 5 times in a row. I'll never forget, a kid was a junior. He patted him on the butt. He said, listen, I hope we're here next year. And if we are again, I hope you're right on this free throw line because you're a great free throw shooter. Think about that. Now, when they went into the game, what was the goal? What was the outcome goal? It's to win the game. I've never heard a coach say, you know, our outcome today is to go lose a game. Performance goal, they had listed that what they wanted to do was shoot 75% from the free throw line. That was their performance goal. Hey, and by the way, performance goals are great because they help you measure things that you might need to work on in practice. But let me tell you something. When that young man was at the free throw line, whether they shot 74% if he missed both, or whether they shot 76% because he made both, 74% if he missed both, 76% if he made both, really had no bearing on anything. The only thing that had a bearing on was process.
Okay. So Jeff is great. If that piques your interest in the 3D workshop, I don't know what doesn't. So feel free to explore some of that later, but Jeff is great. So BEEF, silly little thing, but that's so true. It may be that word or that acronym that helps our athletes remember the process, right? That exactly helped his athlete remember the process of shooting the free throw. And maybe that works for you. Maybe that works for your team, of creating an acronym or a word or a reminder of a play or a set piece, whatever it is that helps that athlete in the process of performance. So, and what's great about it is that the coach and the athlete got time to just be one-on-one, right, at that free throw line, and reminding his athlete that even though they lost the game, it didn't matter because he's a great free throw shooter, right? He could make 5 right then and there, right? And sometimes, of course, the environment of the game and the pressure of the game gets on the athlete. But that created a great opportunity for that coach and athlete to bond and encourage his athlete right then in that moment, even though they lost. So it's a great reminder for us to coach process goals. So aside from process, now we're going to move into the more goals versus purpose. So if you pull that packet up, there's a little chart where we compare the two. So though goals are not innately bad, they often make us lose sight of the purpose because we're so focused on that goal. Jeff kind of alluded to it in the video of the 74% or 76%, whether he made or missed. And that's kind of the idea. So if we get so fixated on that goal, we kind of lose sight of why we even had that goal or why we're striving towards something in general. So we're going to look at that chart. So goals tend to be a what, like 75% at the free throw line. Purpose tends to be a why. Why do we need to be 75% at the free throw line? That will help us win the game. That will help us create discipline, those type of things that we can build on. So then the second one there is goals are task oriented and purpose is relationship oriented. And that points right back at that video that we just watched, right? That coach got to be on the free throw line one-on-one with his athlete, relationally encouraging that athlete. And then the last one there is goals are measurable and purpose is often immeasurable. So goals are specific events that happen in time. So once a goal is achieved, it just becomes a part of history. So if we say, hey, our goal for the game is to score a touchdown every quarter of the game. Well, yeah, even if our athletes do that and we may win the game or lose the game, if we still score a touchdown every inning, it just becomes a part of history. It doesn't really help our athletes any, because we could score a touchdown every inning and we could still lose. We could still not meet the need or the purpose of the season or the purpose of the team or even a purpose for the athlete. That doesn't really help them as a person. So as coaches, we should not be confusing goals with purpose. Goals are great signposts or markers for a journey of where we're headed. But if all we do is focus on those performance goals, like winning a tournament, it kind of leaves the athlete looking in the rear view mirror because their identity is found in their performance. And then especially I've seen this in high school and in college of once an athlete's performance days or competitive days are over, they kind of look in the rear view mirror and are kind of reflecting on their life like, what now, right? Like my time as a volleyball player is over or my time as a quarterback is over. What now? What do I do? And that kind of helps us if we're coaching our athletes things like discipline, coachability, character, then that will propel them into their next step of life. But once they graduate from high school or graduate college or whenever their time as an athlete's over, they kind of have those what now things. If I've never been taught what discipline really is, or if I've never really been helped to identify my purpose or character or what coachability means, then what now that my time as an athlete's over? So we want to create these better style of goals, these purpose goals to help our athletes in the future, help our athletes after their time as an athlete's over. So what the athlete does after their sport is what propels them into their next stage of life. So that's what why process goals are so powerful. So the next question is, can any of you guys share a time where you've coached a process goal that changed the course of performance or all-around play for an athlete? So maybe a time where you identified that process goal and it changed that athlete innately, like it changed their behavior on the court or their atmosphere of a team all around on the field. And this may be harder to think of one, but awkward time.
I have one. So I'm the head varsity coach at Wayne High School girls soccer, and this is my 9th season, but historically we are not good. Historically, we don't even really win games. When I first took over this job, we were like 2-15. So my goal in these 9 years have just to improve us. And this particular athlete wasn't really an athlete, I would say. She was relatively athletic, but didn't have that motivation, didn't have that drive. She was definitely on the field for her friends. And she played outside mid, and one of the big impact things with an outside mid is if you can get her to run at the goal, even when a shot's taken that's not really a good shot, but just she could get that back post tuck in. And we finally got her to do it. And it wasn't like we shook her. We just continued to reiterate to her that you have to run back post, you have to run back post. And she finally scored. And not only did that change her drive to continue to go back post, but it changed her drive all over the field, because she finally realized, hey, coach knows what she's talking about. Coach knows that I need to do X, Y, and Z. And so this girl who was average at best really became one of our leaders on the field, just because she was listening to us and she was doing the things that we asked her to do. And this young lady would have never been the athlete that she ended up being, I think, without that opportunity to score that goal and to do exactly what we told her to do at that time. Do you know what I'm talking about, Blair?
Yes, I do.
I have an example, but actually the one that came to my mind is from when I was a player. So when I played volleyball in college, I remember being out on the court and I was having some struggles with blocking. And I remember at one point, I think it was in a timeout, one of our assistant coaches pulled me aside and said, hey, when you're blocking, you really need to make sure you're turning your outside hand in. To keep that ball, when you block it, to keep that ball in the court versus going out of bounds. And I said, okay. So I went out there, and like the next ball that is set, I go up to block and I really focus on keep my outside hand turned in. And I do that and I get a block. And so it was 1 point in the game, and it wasn't an extremely significant point by any means, but I remember that moment as a player. And I remember turning right away to the sideline and looking at that assistant coach. And we just like made this eye contact and like kind of gave each other this like thumbs up of like, awesome. But I know that as a player, that was really influential for me. Like I said, it wasn't a significant point, but I remember it because, it just showed that the process does affect the outcome. And so I think as a coach, I've carried that with me of wanting to help my players be aware of those process goals.
That's funny. That reminds me of the times I would encourage athletes in process goals, and then they would do it. And then we'd look eye contact and we would smile. And then I'd turn to another coach and I go, I can't believe that actually worked. That's
Amen.
good.
Yep. Yeah, that's so true. But those are kind of like those aha moments for our athletes, right? Like those light bulb, like they're getting it, they get it, right? And it feels so good as a coach, really, too, because it's not like Saul said, it's not like that I told you so, but it's like, yes, right? Like she got it, he got it, yes. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So that kind of leads us into our point 2 of the day. So be a coach of purpose, right? Simple, but very impactful, not very simple at all. Be a coach of purpose. Okay, so that leads us into our last little bit here. We're almost done. So this little section here builds off of last week. So if you weren't here last week, that's okay. This will still be good for you. Jeff Duke shares with us something he calls mindset questions. So this kind of helps align our mindset in like day-to-day goals and tasks. So the first one, and these are good to remember and write down and kind of help you unpack your transformational why purpose. If you haven't done that already, that's totally okay. If maybe you're still digging into that, that's okay too. But these are good for you to kind of help build on that. And maybe you already have your transformational why purpose or why you coach. That's okay too, because these will still help you dig into that and be reminding you of that. So the first one is, why do you coach? We unpacked that a lot last week. So why do you coach? The second one is, why do you coach the way you coach? That one was really interesting to me because I think I honestly think I coach the way I coach because I've seen coaches who've coached me do things really well and do things really poorly, right? I'm sure you can think of a time that you've had with a coach in your athletic career if you're like, wow, that coach really knows what they're doing. They really care about me. And then I'm sure we can think of the opposite too, right? Like I don't know. Like, I don't, if I ever get the opportunity to coach, I wouldn't do it this way. Right. Or maybe certain moments or instances you can point back to where you just had a coach handle something you wouldn't have handled, or had an opinion of how you would have handled it differently. So now we have the opportunity to change that. So why do you coach the way that you coach? The third is, how does it feel to be coached by you? This one may be hard to swallow sometimes, but why do you coach, or how does it feel to be coached by you? And honestly, I would encourage you to ask your athletes. Maybe write up a slip of paper with like 5 questions on a scale of 1 to 5, satisfied or dissatisfied, or agree or disagree, of how your athletes feel about you, and then open that honest environment for them to share how they truly feel, how it truly feels to be coached by them. And then maybe it takes following up meetings. Maybe it's one-on-one meetings with your athletes, whatever works best for you and your team, and what degree you coach at. But it's important, I think, to know how it feels to be coached by you, because I think we may have a perception or an idea of how it feels, right? Of course, we want all of our athletes to think we're great and we know what we're doing, and they feel loved and cared for, but that may not always be the case. So it's important to ask those questions. And then the last one is, what is your definition of success? So how do you define success? And that's important to unpack too. If it's a tournament, if it's winning a trophy, if it's those kind of things, then we need to go back to that first question, right? Why do we coach? Kind of realign our mindset. Those questions help us carve that out. So answering these questions will help us create and define that transformational purpose statement, that what's your why. And we don't have to fully answer these, of course, right now, but it's foundational to think about these deeper, because this will move us into the third dimension of coaching, that heart dimension, that soul dimension of the athlete. So start with the why. Why do you coach? Why do you coach the way you coach? Move to the how. How does it feel to be coached by you? And then identify the what. What's the definition of success? So your why should drive that how and what. You have to find that why first. So then the last point of the day, point number 3, is be a coach driven by the why. Be a coach driven by the why. And that kind of points back to last week. So again, if you missed that, feel free to go to our YouTube or our website to find the link to that. But that's all we have for you today. So be a coach of process, number 1. Be a coach of purpose is number 2. And then be a coach driven by the why is number 3. And again, thank you guys for sharing about your experiences as a coach. I know it's great to talk with other coaches about story time and those kind of things, and awesome moments you've seen on the field or the court. So I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day. If anyone has any questions or anything else they want to share about those aha moments, those purpose goals, and any moments they want to share, I'd love to hear them. But thank you guys again for joining us this week.
Absolutely. Be blessed. And we're praying for all of you during this time. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Great.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.